On this video, I would like to continue the study of the Greek text, uh, looking at grammar along with commentary of the book of Hebrews, chapter 1, verses 5 and following. I'm going to try to hold it to 15 minutes, so I may stop somewhere in the middle of the chapter. When you look at the flow of thought, verses 5 to 14, the writer of Hebrews is giving three basic arguments for the superiority of Jesus Christ. He is greater than the angels, and this is what he's setting forth because he is the begotten Son, eternally begotten Son, where angels are to worship him someday when he comes at the second coming, I believe. Then in verses 7 to 12, the angels are simply ministering spirits sent forth, and they're simply like the wind or like lightning, where the Son is God and he is the reigning sovereign who is also the creator of all things, something that angels were not. And then thirdly, angels, he never said to angels, sit at my right side till I make your enemies the footstool of your feet. They're simply ministering spirits sent forth to minister to those that are heirs of salvation. That is sort of a summary of the thought. Of course, he's doing it by quoting a text from the Hebrew scriptures. In the first argument, he'll be quoting from Psalm 2, 2 Samuel 7, and then from the Septuagint of Psalm 97. And so I'm going to do that first argument and then just take my time working through this, looking at the grammar and seeking to look at the interpretation as well. Tenagar e penpatiton angelum, quiasmu e su, ego semeran gegenica se, kai palen, ego essamai auto es patera, kai autas estai moi es huion. And then the verse 6, hatan de palan esagage tan bratatakan estain oikumenen lege, kai praskunesatosan auto pantes angeloi theu. So as we translate it, for to which of the angels, or to whom formerly of the angels, did he say, you are my son? I today have begotten you. And again, I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. And when again he brings his firstborn into the inhabited world, he then says, let all the angels of God worship him. So that's the first argument. He's quoting, showing that Jesus is greater than angels. He's quoting from Psalm 2, first of all, verse 7, followed by 2 Samuel 7:14. And then the last quote is from Deuteronomy. I think there's an allusion in Psalm 97, verse 7, but quoting from Deuteronomy 32, verse 43. And he's quoting from the Septuagint. So for to whom did he ever say of the angels? Apen is from lego. It's the aorist indicative active third person singular from lego. Which of the angels did he ever say, huias mu esu, you are my son? Ego, notice emphatic here, ego, I, semeran gegene kase, I have given birth to you. This is a quote from Psalm 2, and verse 7. And when he says gegenika, we're looking at the perfect indicative active first person singular from genao, to beget. So you are my son. And by the way, a is just your present indicative active second person singular from a me. So you are my son. I today have begotten you. When we look at Psalm 2, verse 7, in the Hebrew, Beniata, Ani Hayom Yaliticha, you are my son. I today have begotten you. That particular text is applied in the New Testament in the book of Acts, chapter 14, by the Apostle Paul to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ has conquered death, and it's looking, and I think even in the writer of Hebrews, looking at his ultimate victory over death. Actually, it's chapter 13. I said 14. Chapter 13 of Acts, where Paul talks about the second psalm and then applies it to the resurrection, how he has fulfilled that psalm by raising Jesus, as it is said, as it is written in the second psalm, you are my son. I today have given birth to you. And he goes on to talk about how David's tomb is still with us, but Christ is alive. And so the begetting here, ego gegenika, is applied to the resurrection and to the ascension of Christ, to his victorious work. So which of the angels did he ever say then, you are my son? And by the way, Psalm 2, in its historical setting, is looking at the coronation day of a king. That kind of language was used at coronation, to be begotten. We know that when we look at the way it's used in a Ugaritic text, the same idea. When a king is being coronated, it's as though the God is giving birth. And so it's recognizing his coronation. So can we say in New Testament application, then, the coronation of Christ is the resurrection? That's where he is coronated as king. And so then we go on, and I would see Psalm 2 having a double fulfillment, what I would call a typically messianic text, referring to the coronation of an Israeli king, and then looking ultimately at the coronation of Christ in his resurrection. The historical context is debated. Rashi, a medieval Jewish commentator, applies it to when the Philistines came against David and his coronation. We don't know exactly when it historically was applied as to what coronation, but here in the New Testament, in its final typical fulfillment, it's referring to Jesus Christ. And I think the writer of Hebrews is no doubt in a similar thought with Paul, the Apostle Paul, looking at the resurrection and the ascension of Christ. So he never said to angels that kind of a statement, you are my son, I today have given birth to you. And again, ego estamai auto eis patera kai autas estai moi eis huion. I will be to him a father, and he will be to me a son. Estamai is your future indicative, from a me. I will be, first person singular, future indicative active. I will be to him unto a father, and he will be. Estai is your future indicative active third person singular from a me. and he shall be to me unto a son. And so here we have a quote from 2 Samuel 7, verses 7-14. We're looking at the Davidic covenant, at one who would reign over David's throne forever, ad olam. And we know in the New Testament, in Luke 1, that very text was applied concerning the birth of Christ, who would reign on David's throne. And so what the writer of Hebrews is saying is he never said this to the angels, I will be a father to him and he will be a son to me. In other words, that covenant was uniquely given to Christ, who is now the coronated Son by virtue of his glorious victory over death in resurrection and glorification. But what did he say to the angels? So in verse 6 it continues, Hatan depanan esagage tan pratatakan es tain oikumenen lege. That is, but when again he brings the firstborn into the inhabited world, he then says, Kai praskunesatosan alto pantes angeloi thau. And let all the angels of God worship him. Whenever he, a sagage, is your aorist active form here, aorist aorist subjunctive active, third person singular from esago. Whenever he brings the firstborn, prototokon is looking at firstborn in the sense not that Christ was born, he is eternal with the Father, but it's a way of looking at the number one in the house, number one person, like the firstborn was the favored one, the exalted one. And so I think it's looking at that idea. We have this, for example, in the Psalms, when it speaks of the firstborn king, and the application is the highest of the kings of the earth. And so prototokon means highest, or firstborn in that sense, sovereign. So whenever he brings the sovereign one into the inhabited world, the world that is inhabited, a participle here, he says, lege is your present indicative active third person singular from lego. Let all the angels of God worship him. Praskune satosan is from praskuneo. It means to worship. It's the aorist active imperative third person plural from praskuneo. Let all the angels of God worship him. And this is a quote, by the way, from Deuteronomy 32:43. It's a quote from the Septuagint. So let all the angels of God worship him when he brings his firstborn into the inhabited world. And I would take this probably to refer to the second coming of Christ, when the Father brings his firstborn into the world a second time, then all the angels are called to worship him. It could also refer to his incarnation, his coming, and could have a double meaning. That is, whenever he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, the angels, let all the angels worship him. And certainly at the birth of Jesus, angels were singing his praises. And when he comes again with his holy angels, they will be worshiping him as well. So in the first argument, and I'm going to stop here, the Son is superior to angels because he is the coronated one. He is the one via resurrection and glorification who is the begotten one, meaning the coronated one, and he is fulfilling the Davidic covenant. That promise was given to him in 2 Samuel 7 to be the one to fulfill and reign on David's throne forever, which I believe he's doing now and will do it forever. And then furthermore, the angels are called to bow down and worship him whenever the Son is brought into the inhabited world. And we could see a summary possibly of his first advent and then culminating in his second advent. So he's greater than angels because he has inherited a more excellent name than they have, and he's explaining what that is all about.